Gary Coleman, just hearing his name might remind you of that bright, clever little kid who once adorned your TV screen, quipping in that lovable, mischievous voice. Yet did you know that behind his comedic lines and heartwarming grin, Gary privately harbored a deep anxiety about how long his moment in the limelight would really last? As a child star in the late 1970s, he soared higher than many adult actors ever do, catapulting to pop culture fame with unusual speed. But away from the cameras, Gary faced unrelenting pressures from serious health issues, fraught family relationships, and a grueling industry that often treats children like short-term novelties. What follows here is the unvarnished story of Gary Coleman's life, how he began with the sweet innocence of a seriously ill boy determined to prove himself, rose to unimaginable sitcom stardom, then became tangled in bitter controversies, all culminating in a sudden tragic end that cut short a life many once believed would go on shining forever. Gary Wayne Coleman was born on February 8, 1968, in Zion, Illinois. Adopted by Willie Coleman, a forklift operator, and Edmonia Sue Coleman, a nurse practitioner, baby Gary immediately faced daunting health challenges. Diagnosed with significant kidney problems, he underwent operations from early infancy. Dialysis treatments became part of his routine. But while some children might have withered under such strain, Gary discovered something remarkable. Whenever he told a joke or flashed a big smile, it seemed to shrink the fears in the hospital room. Nurses adored him. Other patients found him uplifting. Even at 2 or 3 years old, Gary noticed how a well-timed smile or playful jab could lighten the mood of everyone around. This budding talent for humor would serve as both a shield against his own pain and an unexpected key to his future career. During Gary's elementary school years, the Colemans did everything possible to provide him a normal life. Yes, there were medical appointments, hospital stays, and special medications. But Gary's parents wanted him to have the same joys as other kids in the neighborhood. When he wasn't in the hospital, he rode his bike, played tag, and watched classic sitcoms on TV. He admired the comedic timing of older stars, from Laurel and Hardy to Lucille Ball. His mother recalled him once standing on a makeshift stage in the living room, reciting lines from commercials he'd memorized, just to make his family laugh. Observing their boy's fearless comedic spark, the Colemans took him to a local talent agency. Even if it never led to anything big, they figured a few local commercials might help cover medical bills and let Gary have some fun in the process. By the mid-1970s, Gary, then about 6 or 7, had auditioned for local commercials in the Chicago area. Despite his small stature, he wouldn't grow much due to his failing kidneys. He exuded a compelling mixture of sweetness and wit. People in casting sessions found themselves disarmed by this tiny child who delivered lines with unexpected comedic beats. One day, an agent from California visiting Chicago for a scouting trip caught wind of Gary's unique presence. Impressed by his audition tape, the agent convinced the Colemans that Gary had a real chance in the national commercial and television scene. So, the family uprooted themselves to Los Angeles, the mecca of entertainment. It was a tremendous leap for working-class parents from Illinois, but they believed wholeheartedly in Gary's promise. That leap paid off sooner than they ever imagined. In 1977, Norman Lear, one of television's legendary figures, discovered Gary through a series of auditions. Lear was assembling a new sitcom about 2 African-American kids from a poor background who end up living with a wealthy widower on Park Avenue. Gary's comedic flair made him perfect for the role of Arnold Jackson on Diff'rent Strokes. Arnold was smaller than his older brother Willis, but had an outsized personality. From the show's launch in 1978, audiences instantly fell in love with the wisecracking, bright-eyed boy who had a habit of tilting his head and delivering that catchphrase, "What you talking about?" in a tone that no one else could replicate. Even the adult co-star Conrad Bain recognized that the show's success heavily relied on Gary's comedic timing. Network executives and sponsors saw the ratings surge and knew they had stumbled upon a goldmine. Soon, Coleman became one of the highest-paid child actors in the history of television, commanding hefty fees for each episode. Still, behind the glitz of primetime fame, Gary's health demands lingered. He regularly visited medical centers for blood work and checkups, continuing intermittent dialysis. On set, long hours sometimes wore him out. More than once, filming had to pause so Gary could rest or receive treatment, but he refused to let the crew see him complain. In interviews, he put on a happy, playful front, rarely hinting at the toll it took. Co-stars sometimes recalled glimpsing him curled up in a corner, quietly resting between scenes. Others spoke of how he'd bounce back the moment cameras rolled, delivering lines with that trademark sparkle. For a boy who lived half his life in hospital wards, Diff'rent Strokes was both a dream come true and a marathon of responsibilities. Off camera, the show's cast formed a tight but sometimes conflicted family. The older kids, Todd Bridges and Dana Plato, wrestled with their own teenage issues. Gary, younger and physically smaller, often played peacemaker, though he also had his own complexities, particularly about money. His adoptive parents handled the majority of his earnings. Because of his youth, he didn't question the arrangement. If something felt off, he chalked it up to adult stuff he wasn't meant to worry about. For a while, that system functioned well enough. Everyone was flush with success. The show garnered multiple seasons. Fan clubs sprang up, and "What you talking about, Willis?" became a national catchphrase. Gary would appear at charity events, game shows, or cameo as Arnold Jackson on other sitcoms, enjoying the peak of child stardom. Two lesser-known events during Diff'rent Strokes highlight Gary's complex situation behind that comedic exterior. The first involves a near-panic meltdown he had on set in 1981. According to a production assistant, Gary had just returned from an intense dialysis session and arrived on set to film a comedic scene involving physical slapstick. Exhausted, he tried multiple takes, messing up lines. Frustrated, he abruptly left the stage in tears, an extremely rare break of composure for him. The crew gave him space, uncertain what to do. About half an hour later, he returned, apologized to everyone, and insisted he was fine. But that moment revealed just how hard he pushed himself to maintain the happy kid act. Another lesser-known event took place when Gary was about 13. The producers had planned an episode exploring racism in an overly simplistic manner. Gary spoke up at a script meeting, suggesting they handle the topic more seriously, referencing real incidents he'd read about in the news. He was politely ignored. That taught him an early lesson about the limits of a child star's influence in shaping storylines, even if he was the main draw. By 1986, Diff'rent Strokes ended, partly due to falling ratings and the cast aging out of their original roles. Gary was around 18, but physically still resembled a younger teen. Fans who had grown up with him started moving on. For him, that was a jarring shift. He found himself in a precarious position, widely recognized but typecast as Arnold. He pursued roles in various TV pilots, cameo appearances, and even tried comedic stand-up in small clubs. Nothing replicated the unstoppable momentum of his earlier years. He realized that playing Arnold had turned him into a sort of TV icon, yet the comedic child persona overshadowed any attempt to be seen as a mature actor. Worse, as he gained some perspective over his finances, it emerged that the trust funds he believed were secure might be significantly depleted. Lawsuits followed, pitting him against his adoptive parents and financial advisors, unraveling the family ties that once offered him security. With the 1990s came more personal upheavals. His health remained fragile. He underwent further dialysis sessions. At times he felt so drained he could hardly function for more than a few hours a day. He also struggled with short tempers, triggered by stress. In one high-profile incident, Gary faced legal troubles after an altercation with a fan who reportedly taunted him about his height and past fame. The tabloids spun this as a meltdown from a fallen star. Gary tried to defend himself, explaining how constant jabs, jokes, and prying questions had chipped away at him, but the press had little sympathy. Meanwhile, cameo appearances in comedic sketches or reality shows capitalized on his old catchphrases, often humiliating him rather than showcasing any new talents. Seeking a quieter life, he moved away from Hollywood's glare. He took up everyday jobs, including a widely reported position as a mall security guard. Interviews from that period show a man both resigned and defiant. "I can't be Arnold forever," he once told a reporter, "and I shouldn't have to be." He spoke openly about feeling exploited by certain family members, describing a betrayal that had deepened his distrust of others. Romantic relationships proved rocky as well. In 2007, Gary married Shannon Price, an event overshadowed by ongoing conflicts that saw them split and reconcile multiple times. The tabloids fixated on these disputes, painting a portrait of chaos. In truth, Gary's emotional state often seemed precarious, shaped by the frustrations of lost fortune, limited career prospects, and relentless health battles. Approaching 2010, he found a semblance of routine living in Utah. Although it was a far cry from the star-studded life many assumed he once enjoyed, Gary expressed a bittersweet acceptance. He still wanted to do comedic projects, but the opportunities rarely arose. He was at times short on funds. He occasionally gave heartfelt interviews, hoping to find a supportive audience. But the cruel cycle of sensational headlines and lingering resentment from fans who only remembered the childlike innocence of Arnold left him isolated. Even so, some glimpses of the old comedic spark remained in private gatherings. He'd crack a wry observation or mention a moment from Diff'rent Strokes with a nostalgic smile. Yet friends observed he had grown physically weaker, losing stamina from ongoing dialysis. All that changed drastically on May 26, 2010, when Gary suffered a fall at his home in Santa Quin, Utah, hitting his head hard enough to cause a significant intracranial hemorrhage. By the time paramedics arrived, he was unconscious, with the hemorrhage rapidly escalating. Over the next 2 days, he lay in the hospital on life support, unresponsive. Medical staff concluded the damage to his brain was irreversible. On May 28th, he was removed from life support, passing away at 42. Reports indicated that the fall might have been triggered by dizziness or other complications. No foul play was established. For fans who'd grown up with him, it felt like a sudden, harrowing blow. The comedic child star, so small yet brimming with wisecracks, had slipped away from the world with startling speed. The immediate aftermath unleashed controversy. Some people questioned the role of Shannon Price in his final decisions. Others revisited the older allegations about mismanaged finances. Yet no formal accusations emerged. The official stance was that his death was a tragic accident, not a crime. The discussion turned to whether better living conditions, stronger social or medical support, or a more stable relationship might have prevented the accident. Ultimately, it was one more heartbreak in an adult life already shaped by many. While no single event overshadowed his fall, the sum of all his struggles, health, finances, family disputes, and typecasting, painted a picture of a man worn down long before that day in May 2010. His funeral and memorial services were subdued. The public, having watched Gary's comedic talent fade from the primetime spotlight years before, experienced a wave of nostalgia mixed with sadness. Diff'rent Strokes reruns aired as tributes, viewers reliving that unstoppable comedic timing he'd once wielded so effortlessly. For those who knew him personally, the grief was complicated by regrets. Regrets that they hadn't reached out more. Regrets that Gary never found the stable adult career he yearned for. Regrets that medical burdens overshadowed any shot at normal life. Todd Bridges, his on-screen brother, spoke of the bittersweet memory of their comedic synergy on set, lamenting how the show's child actors had all faced painful adult realities. Even though Gary Coleman's story ends abruptly with that fatal accident, his role as Arnold Jackson remains a cultural touchstone, an enduring memory of a child star who once made America laugh. Many rewatch Diff'rent Strokes and see a bright boy, unstoppable in comedic force, not quite grasping that behind the scenes he was wrestling with formidable health issues and adult predicaments. He might not have shaped an expansive filmography, but his comedic spark and personal battles left a lingering emotional mark on anyone who witnessed his rare blend of innocence and maturity. By recalling his real-life challenges, we can sense the fragile humanity that existed beneath the show's playful facade. And that's all for today's video. Don't forget to leave a like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe so you'll always be in the loop. Thanks for watching.